It's another Carolina Podcast Emergency Edition. Congratulations, Joey Hunter, the newest commitment for the 2020 class of South Carolina. He's a 3-star defensive back out of the state of Georgia. Just announced his commitment to South Carolina. It was sort of down to Carolina and Texas A&M, and we decided we needed to do an emergency podcast. We work so quickly just for you guys. That's how much we care about you. You might even be suspicious about how quickly we're getting this thing up relative to when Joey Hunter Jr. III announced his commitment. But here we are. Thanks for making us a part of your day, wherever you are, however you're listening. We really appreciate it. And if you guys want to continue to support the podcast, please do so by rating, reviewing, subscribing, and sharing with your friends. I'm your host, Pearson Fowler. With me, as always, Wes Mitchell and Chris Clark to break down the Joey Hunter commitment, to talk a little bit about Luke Doty, who's participating in the Elite 11 camp right now, and then the opening involving several South Carolina either commits or targets. The guys, like I mentioned right off the top, we'll get started with the emergency announcement of the day, and that is the commitment of Joey Hunter, as I mentioned, 3-star defensive back, adding one more to Carolina's class. Looks like they probably have room for about one or two more defensive backs, but getting close to wrapping this thing up for the defensive backfield. But first and foremost, take me through the process of his recruitment.
Yeah, Joey was a guy that South Carolina offered in camp this summer, sort of hit the radar a little later. This is a weaker class overall, just in terms of regionally in South Carolina's sort of general geographic recruiting footprint for defensive backs. And so a little tougher to find ones this year that you really like. And they had him in camp, really liked him. He looked good just physically. I mean, he's a 6'1", 188-pound kid. He tested well. He ran, higher 4.5s in the 40, which is pretty good for his size. He vertical jumped well, he broad jumped well, and he did a really nice job in one-on-ones. He's a great kid, too, from a really good family. And so they offered quickly, and things sort of progressed from there. Texas A&M was involved. He had Mississippi State, some other schools involved. He went and camped out at Texas A&M. But as things just progressed, South Carolina was the one that eventually was able to win out for him. He definitely gave a hard look to Texas A&M as well, and there was certainly some back-and-forth element to that behind the scenes, but he took an official visit to Carolina at the end of June that went very well. Really liked the staff's plan for him. Jamie Robinson, freshman defensive back, hosted him and sort of gave him a good feel for what life would be like as a defensive back at Carolina. And Joey really liked Will Muschamp, Travaris Robinson, and he's a guy they think can play corner or nickel in the scheme.
When you say that he was offered in camp, you mean just like a month ago or camp this time last year?
Yeah, this summer.
This is a process that went very, very quickly for Hunter and for Carolina.
Yeah, definitely. It went quickly. And he was a guy, look, Carolina knew about him. He played at Sandy Creek High, which is a high school that typically produces talent almost every year. They produce a lot of SEC talent over the year. Alan Knott came from Sandy Creek. They have a defensive back, Brian Branch, who's committed to Georgia, who plays alongside Joey. So Carolina has been involved with Brian Branch. They were earlier in the process. So certainly this is a guy, it's not a guy that South Carolina said, oh, Joey Hunter, never heard of him. But, they had him in camp. Not sure if they were expecting that they would offer him at that point, but he came to campus and, tested well, which is certainly something they look at. Wes and I were out there watching him. Certainly he looks impressive physically. I mean, he's every bit of 6'1", almost looks taller than that. Really put together well and still developing his game, really. I was talking to someone who knows him well in Georgia yesterday, and I think he said 4 or 5 years ago the kid was 5'8", and so he was a smaller kid. He's gotten a lot bigger. He's really filled out, and he's still somewhat raw, as a defensive back, but he's got a lot of tools to work with. He's very physical. He's a great kid. He's got a great mentality, and so he sort of checks off a lot of the boxes that you look for.
So you're sort of hinting at it already, but I want to get your take. Obviously, you said he's a little bit raw as a defensive back, but clearly athletic. He has the size and length that Will Muschamp likes from defensive backs. What kind of player is Carolina getting with Hunter?
Well, I think he's got enough versatility to where he could play safety if they wanted him to, but right now they're eyeing him as a corner nickel. You watch him on film, and obviously with his size, you would expect that he's a guy that's going to be physical, and he is. So you're not disappointed when you turn on the film and watch him tackle. That's something that Will Muschamp's always talked about, especially his first couple years in Columbia, in terms of South Carolina just needing to tackle better on the perimeter, having guys that are willing to do it, and Joey's certainly that. He's aggressive. He's got good ball skills. He had a really good year last year in terms of not giving up catches. He had some good numbers there, and so he's got that length. And he doesn't run. He's not an elite runner in terms of his speed, but for his size, he does run well enough. And I think with some refinement on his technique and just continuing to progress, he's got a chance to be a really good player. And he's certainly got the work ethic to where I think he'll put in the work.
Yeah, I mean, I think like Chris said, with the DBs maybe being down a bit regionally, you're going to see South Carolina sort of take some guys that maybe check all their boxes, but maybe are a little bit raw. I think you just look at the class so far with Donald Fortune, Dominic Hill. You're talking about like high upside guys that maybe you're gonna not quite be ready right off the bat, like a J.C. Horn was, like an Izzy McQuame was, to a little bit lesser standard. But I think if you look at these guys, they all sort of just match what South Carolina's looking for at that position. I personally, I think you could see Joey end up playing safety long term, even though they've got him as like a corner nickel, and they cross.
Is that just because he's a little rangier?
Yeah, I look at his frame, and I think he's a bigger guy. And then I look at who he's coming in with in this class. I think maybe you like Dom Hill or Donald Fortune's ability in one-on-one man situations, maybe a little bit better. But we'll see as far as how all three of those guys develop. Because a lot of times, if you look at a defensive backfield, it's not just about the skill set of the players. It's about who's around them and what gets the best five on the field. So, I think the fact that he's got the size to play safety is helpful for him in the long term. That nickel position is kind of a hybrid spot these days. So, he fits in there as well. And I think if you look at all these defensive backs, it's sort of, you're always looking for a standard as far as size, speed, athleticism. We were talking about, lateral movement, stuff like that. I think these guys fit what they're looking for.
So this is maybe a weird question, because I think obviously the more highly touted recruits and the guys that you want are the guys that are ready to come in and play right away. But specifically because this is Will Muschamp and because you have T-Rob, is there some extent to where this coaching staff would almost prefer someone that has the frame that they're looking for, the length and athleticism, but is maybe a little bit more raw, so that Will Muschamp and Travaris Robinson can sort of turn the defensive back into, sort of mold them exactly the way they want, as opposed to someone coming in with sort of preconceived notions about ways to play the position that may not necessarily mesh with what Will and T-Rob want?
I mean, I don't know. I think the main thing is, do they check the boxes of what they're looking for? Some guys are already a little bit more developed. Obviously, if you can bring in a J.C. Horn type guy that already is sort of in a position where he, has been, I guess, taught up, I guess, is a way to say it. Even if you have to change a few things with their technique, I think it comes down to, is the guy coachable? Whether he's raw or whether he's not raw, or whether he already knows, what you're doing as far as a scheme standpoint and a footwork standpoint, or doesn't. I think it's about, is a guy able to easily adjust to what you're telling him? And I think that's something they actually, probably an underrated part of the stuff that they look at in camp is, they're on these kids hard, and they coach them. I think people would probably be surprised. They coach them just like they would their current players. And that's partially to see how they respond. And, and I mean partially from like a physical standpoint, as far as can they take the coaching and then apply it. And that's partially from a mental standpoint of how do they react to being coached like that? Because not every guy appreciates or responds to that style of coaching. And I think one thing Muschamp has said is, he tells all his assistants, coach them the way you're going to coach them when they get here. That way you can weed out the guys that aren't going to respond to the way they do things here. So I think that's an interesting element of it that probably gets lost in the whole, 40-yard dash size, all that stuff.
One more question about Hunter's recruitment specifically. This one came down to Carolina and Texas A&M. How much do you guys know about the pitch and sort of counter pitch from Carolina and from the Aggies, and what was ultimately the decision maker for Hunter? Were they pitching playing time? Is there something about the new facilities? Because I think Texas A&M has good facilities because they have all the money in the world. I'm curious how those sorts of specific kind of one-against-one recruiting battles go.
Well, with Joey, I mean, you got to consider one thing. I think the only school that he took an official visit to was South Carolina. And so, he went to Texas A&M and camped. And when you do that, generally you get a sort of a more cursory look at the school, just like Joey did when he was at South Carolina for camp. He went to South Carolina, then right after that he went to A&M, and he really, really liked A&M. I mean, really liked what he saw out there, and certainly have a lot of different things to offer too. But on the official visit, obviously that's a much more comprehensive look at the school. And so I think he felt good about the playing time in Columbia. He felt good about the timing of the decision in terms of just he was ready to make a decision on July 2nd, which is his mother's birthday. He wanted to make the decision. Both sides were ready, and so that's what he went with. So I think it was about, just talking to Joey, it was about playing time. It was about, Will Muschamp and Travaris Robinson, their track record for defensive backs, and just the feel of the program. Everybody, he felt like everybody on the team gelled together, was sort of like a family. Everybody sort of hangs out together. So those are the things I think about South Carolina that appealed to him.
Someone that's already committed to South Carolina and has been sort of in a showcase for the last couple of days is Myrtle Beach quarterback Luke Doty, who's been at the Elite 11 camp. One of the Elite 11 finalists, which, Wes, as you pointed out on my local show yesterday, means he's one of the 20 guys asked to come to the camp. At the end of camp is when they announced the final 11, but Luke has performed pretty well over the first couple days of camp. What have you guys read and seen?
Yeah, all the reports were very, very positive. The Elite 11 puts out an official ranking after, each day, and I think after Sunday he was 4th, and then on Monday they had him as 7th, among the guys that were there, which obviously still puts you firmly, among those top 11. So we'll see. And I think the fact that he's performing, at that level at an event that really doesn't showcase his talents specifically, I think, because anytime you're a dual threat guy and you're going up, it's, a 7-on-7 type situation or a throw only situation, which is what the Elite 11 is, then, it takes away an element that is very, very big in his game, which is his wills and the fact that he can make things happen with his feet, the fact that he's going to face different defenses because they have to account for his feet. So the fact he's able to do that against, literally the best in the country, I think is pretty cool, and I think speaks to his progress. You're talking about a guy that just has steadily gotten better since we first started talking about him back when he was like an 8th grade camper camping at South Carolina.
How much would a strong showing, or I guess will a strong showing at the Elite 11 camp, including probably likely at this point being named to one of those final 11, do for his recruiting rankings? Or are these separate, I guess, assessments of his ability?
What do you think, Chris? I mean, I think it's always helpful. He's at the point now as the number 3 dual threat where there's a lot. You're splitting hairs to an extent.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, like
when you're
is he
that
third?
highly ranked.
Is he third? Is he second? Is he 4th? Excuse me. It's going to be close. So, I think if a guy goes up there and just tears it up, though, and maybe the guy ahead of him doesn't, certainly I think you can move up from a big performance.
Yeah, and I mean that's the other. It's a little bit sometimes of a misconception. Like sometimes guys go out to camps and they perform very well, and that doesn't always equate to like the guy jumping up 100 spots. Like Luke's ranking is already pretty doggone good, and so in some ways that can just sort of validate, where he's at. A really good. And I'm not even saying this about Luke, just sort of a general point, a really good high school football player and prospect doesn't automatically equate to, well, he's really good, he needs to be a high 4-star or a 5-star. I mean, like we heard that about Farrah Cooper a lot in high school. Like he started out as a 2-star, then he was a 3, then he was a 4. After the Shrine Bowl, he ended up as a 4. And obviously he was a really good football player at South Carolina. He was very good. He was an NFL draft pick, still in the league. And so some people go back now and say, well, Farrah should have been a 5-star. No, he shouldn't have. He was really good. He probably should have been higher than he was, even as a 4-star. But yeah, I think like Wes said, it sort of depends on what the other guys around him are doing too. But he's already pretty highly ranked. It's not like he's like, a 3-star who is just sort of surprised and worked his way up there and is due for some huge bump.
Don't you know everybody is underrated?
Everybody
All
is
underrated.
For
every
you're
school.
Good, you're underrated.
For every single school.
Well, let me ask you guys this then specifically. How much stock do you put in to camp? Because we saw last night they were doing a little bit of 7-on-7. Before that, it was, basically just passing drills. I don't know how much of it was Pascal versus, really just like specific non-human interaction passing, like throwing into nets. How much stock do you put into this, and how much do you say, well, it doesn't really matter until they get in an 11v11 situation?
It matters. The way I see it is, like, for some reason there's some hatred towards camps. Like, if a kid does well at camp, then people look at it and say, oh, he should be higher ranked, like we were just talking about. But then, if a kid drops because of camp or something, or doesn't move up to a certain level, it's, well, camps, But, college coaches use them as an evaluation tool. So obviously they think there's some value. So I feel like if we're trying to evaluate talent, we should put some stock in them too. It's not everything, but I'll tell you this: I would rather see a kid in camp than not. Like if I'm just watching his highlight tape or even going to one of his high school games, those things are valuable. But I want to see him in camp too. Certain positions more than others, but and I've seen. We've seen a bunch of quarterbacks who look great in camp, and they can't play dead in a Western in college because, like, they just don't have it mentally, or for whatever reason, they just don't put it together. And then some guys who maybe aren't as impressive in camp at quarterback who are really, really good. Connor Shaw wasn't phenomenal in a high school camp setting, but he was really good here, because it's like Wes said with Luke Doty, like, different skill sets for different guys. There also been some other quarterbacks that we've seen in camp who you look at that guy and say he's going to be a stud, and then he is,
So just further confirmation that recruiting is inscrutable.
Yes.
Also, you do this all the time. I think you do this on purpose, where you use some awesome, hilarious phrase, and then you continue with a long-winded thought so that it's awkward when I have to go back and mention how great that phrase was. You're so bashful, Chris. Just embrace it. You couldn't play dead in a Western. That's amazing. That deserves like
that's a Muschampism though, right?
Is it really?
Yeah.
I've never heard that. That's hilarious.
I think it's a
I want to put
Muschampism.
like applause underneath that in
Can
post
play
production.
dead in a movie.
Can you do that?
Huh?
Can you do that?
Yeah, I could. I don't know if I will.
I didn't
I'm
say
kinda
the
lazy.
cover a bucket of water thing.
No.
Like Muschamp.
You could.
He says that one a lot.
But no, I think I think that the camp is like, it's like one of multiple. Like if you really want to, and I think the goal, if you're a coaching staff, is that everything sort of every opportunity to scout a guy supplements the other ones. So you want to see a guy in person because that can tell you some things that the other areas can't. You see a guy in person, and you're not just watching the best takes. You're not just seeing the highlights. You're seeing, how does this guy perform snap to snap to snap? How does this guy perform when his team is getting their teeth kicked in? Like, how does he respond to negativity possibly? Then you look at highlights, you look at film, and obviously you're seeing maybe some of the upside there. What does this guy look like at his absolute best? Then camp, I think, is more about, does he fit the, what do they call them, critical factors when they're measuring a guy?
That's it.
They have a height, a weight, they have a speed, even probably a vertical jump, a broad jump. They have certain parameters they're wanting for every guy at a particular position to hit in this window. So now you're saying, does he athletically match up with what we're looking for? Because a guy can look really good on film versus guys that are also running 4.9, and you may say, man, this guy's a really good football player. We like him on film. Then you get him in camp, and he runs a 4.95, and you're like, okay, he's not going to be able to separate against SEC defensive backs. So I think if you really, to get the best evaluation, and the funny thing is you can have all those things and still completely whiff on a guy. You may be as sure as you could be about it, and then maybe the guy gets there and he doesn't work hard or something, or he just doesn't develop.
You remember, there are a few instances of this, but whether it's like a rivals camp we cover, South Carolina's camp, but you remember a few years ago there was a South Carolina camp, that we were at in the summer, I think maybe 2017 class, and there was a prospect there that was like a 4-star that we were watching, curious to see him, curious to see what South Carolina thought about him, and he was not good. And he would barely take any reps. When he took reps, he looked disengaged. He he was smaller than we anticipated. His film was good, and he had a bunch of offers. But we saw him, and we went, man, that wasn't good. And South Carolina dropped him
they started
that
recruiting.
day.
Yeah.
I mean, like on the spot, basically. And had another kid in camp who was not nearly as highly rated, loved him, ended up getting a commitment from him. So, I mean, those things happen. There was a kid at Rivals Camp several years back that ended up going Power 5 that had a bunch of offers, including South Carolina, had really good film. He was a lineman and had, I mean, one of the worst performances I've seen at a Rivals Camp. He had the size and everything, but he was not very good. He still ended up signing Power 5. But those are the types of things that, I think you got to take them into consideration a little bit.
Well, down in Frisco, Texas right now, which is where the Elite 11 camp has been held for the last couple days, you're sort of getting the best of both worlds because you're getting the camp atmosphere, and now with the guys from the Elite 11 group joining the rest of the opening camp, is that the right thing to call it?
Mm-hmm.
You're getting a little bit of the sort of competitive part that's normally reserved for games because now the quarterbacks are playing with and against some of the best guys at their respective positions, wide receivers, running backs, defensive backs. So you're getting a little bit of that competitive element, but still doing it in a camp setting where I guess you get a little bit more opportunity to evaluate some of those more specific skills, some of those specific measurables. And Carolina's got, is it 5 or 6 other commits and targets that are joining Luke Doty down there for the remainder of the opening camp?
Well, you got, we'll list them. You got Luke, of course. You got Tank Bigsby. You got Isaiah Walker, who's committed. You got Marshawn Lloyd, who is committed. You got Jaheim Bell, who they're targeting, that is committed to Florida. And then you got Reggie Grimes, I believe.
Okay.
Is
so
the
6 on top of
totality
Doty.
Is Lenneth Whitehead out there too, right?
Yeah,
I think he is. And they've been
7.
recruiting him some.
Okay.
Yeah.
For those of you that didn't see last night, there were a couple clips circulating from the 7-on-7 that they did once the quarterbacks and then all the other skill position guys joined forces, including Marshawn Lloyd juking somebody in what looks sort of like a not exactly an Oklahoma drill, but something similar. Or maybe it was an Oklahoma drill. I don't know. The defensive player didn't do a good enough job that I could tell what he was supposed to be doing, which is credit to Lloyd putting him on skates and then doing a backflip as a celebration, which just speaks to his athleticism for a guy that's also very big. That was probably exciting to see if you're a Carolina fan.
Yeah, I'm actually watching it now. I think that these guys like to cut backflips, I've noticed, in camp settings.
Yeah. I'm always like, don't do that.
Yeah, but they do them actually. It's like not even a thing for them. Like it's
just like jumping up and chest bumping.
Yeah, like most people would think, I'm not even going to attempt to do a backflip, and they do it just like, they get off the couch or something. Like it's simple. But yeah, that kid, you look at some of his numbers out there, and very impressive, and I think confirms some of the things we already knew. I don't know, man. I think the kid, obviously covering South Carolina, might be a little bit biased, but I think the kid's a 5-star type back.
Yeah, I mean he's really good, and I know that. So with Marshawn, there's some track times, and I don't know. I've got to try to dive into it a little bit more to get some context. There's some track times I'm not concerned about, but there's some track times out there that are not the greatest. But the past couple times he's been put on a laser and run, he's run really well. And then you watch his film, and you look at his quickness in those little short areas, side to side. Everybody thinks of Marshawn as just a straight-ahead running back because of his size, but, man, you see him.
He's got great feet.
Oh, he's got great footwork. And he's pretty good in space. He's better than you would anticipate. So I like his explosiveness for sure.
Well, and for those of you that haven't seen the clip, y'all should go check it out because it is impressive. And again, just showcases a little bit of that short, that short distance change of direction.
And we'll give him a shout out at Gamecock Splash. James is where I was watching it.
Oh, sweet.
I don't know where he pulled it from, but that's the Twitter account that it's on. And see, dude, with those track times, I mean, who knows what who knows where that took place? Who knows what the weather was on that day?
And that's just to do with the stopwatch, right? Or is that an
we
official
don't know.
laser
We don't
time?
know. We don't know how they timed
Well,
it.
yeah,
I would
no
trust the
idea.
laser more than a random track time. We don't know who was timing or where or when, like you're pointing out.
Yeah, and who knows if he was 100% that day? Who knows how he felt that day? I mean, there's a million different. I think there's way more. If you're sort of stacking evidence, there's way more evidence that this guy's plenty fast enough than there is that he's not. I think, and you just watch the guy play, and whether it's film against high school guys who obviously aren't as talented as him, or camp settings against guys who are on the same sort of plane as far as athleticism, the guy stands out, and not that he's lowly ranked right now. He's still Rival still has him as like
He's a top 50,
32nd,
top 40 player.
yeah,
Top
32nd or
33
34.
player.
Yeah,
Or top 34
that's
player.
that's elite.
Yeah,
You
it's
know?
pretty good.
That's
Very decent, we'll call him.
Yes.
All right, so give me a quick update. I don't know if there was anything from the 7-on-7s last night, but this is going to be going on until tomorrow, I guess. Tomorrow,
Till
July 3rd.
Yeah.
So any news from the other 6 guys the other 5 guys besides Lloyd and Doty from last night, and sort of what do you think people should be watching for today and tomorrow?
Well, I think the interesting thing to keep an eye on is with Marshawn Lloyd and Tank Bigsby, who's obviously out there too, major target for South Carolina, is what feedback are we going to get after this thing is over from how they interacted with each other? What were the conversations like? Obviously, the fact that you have Luke Doty as the quarterback on one of these 7-on-7 teams, and both those guys are on his team, which I don't know if that was just very fortunate for South Carolina, or if there's sort of, if quarterbacks got to sort of pick, hey, if possible, I'd like to be with these guys. I don't know how that worked, but you got those 2 guys on your team. You got Jaheim Bell on your team, who, like we've said, is a Florida commit, but South Carolina very, very strongly in the mix there. How do all these guys interact with each other? What's the feedback we get there? And do Tank Bigsby and Marshawn Lloyd hit it off and, become tight? Or does it go the other direction? Because I actually think this is the first time they've ever met in person, but it's definitely the first time they've spent an extended amount of time together. So how does that play out? I think you could maybe see that affect things moving forward as far as, Tank Bigsby's approach to the recruiting process, because all we know right now is that, A, South Carolina was really, really strong at one point, and then B, it seemed a little bit more open ever since Marshawn Lloyd committed to South Carolina, and C, that Auburn and Georgia are still in this conversation as well.
So you're almost more interested in sort of the interpersonal relationships with these guys than necessarily the football, which is probably fair, because I think that's probably a part of recruiting that people don't talk about, because it's hard to really know what kind of relationships these guys have unless they're like, hey, this guy and I are friends.
Yeah, and I think, I don't think you worry, any of those guys we're talking about, you don't really worry about them as players. Like, they're all really good players. I mean, the reports are, we haven't even talked about Reggie Grimes, which is, the guy's a borderline 5-star himself, defensive end / outside linebacker / tight end, ran like a 4.51, I think, on the laser out there. You don't worry about any of these guys athletically. It would be interesting to see how they compete with, the best of the best, but all these guys are good players. All these guys can help South Carolina. I think it's more about, which of these guys are going to end up at South Carolina, and certainly that, that running back sort of idea of a duo, which we see is so popular. I think the 2 guys in that situation have to get along, or it doesn't work, So I think that, and some, we all know this. Take it out of football. Take it, just into life. Some people just click, and some people just don't click. So that's a part of this that nobody can really anticipate, and nobody can really. There's nothing a coaching staff can do, for that. It's just about literally how do they interact with each other.
So what's the most guys Carolina has ever had at the opening? Is this about as many guys in terms of total commits and top prospects that they've had?
I don't know. I mean, you're looking at there's only 3 actual commitments out there.
We'd have to go back and research all that out from the past years, but it seems like
I just don't really remember talking about this previously, so I imagine we are now.
When
because
you're
it's a high
combining
number.
the commitments and the high-profile targets together, probably so.
Yeah.
especially just in terms of like the buzz created by all those guys. I would say probably so, but we did not come armed with the rosters from the 2014 session of the opening and things
Why
of
did
that
we not?
nature. I don't know. Well,
Because y'all just aren't
I told you
prepared.
to do that before we came in.
It's because it's early in the morning. Wes came in with his just a
remember
glass
we're
of
recording
orange
this
juice.
in the afternoon, right after.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Wes came in with his afternoon orange juice because he's a terrorist and he drinks orange juice in the afternoon.
And bacon, egg, and cheese
Yeah.
in the afternoon.
Yeah, well, bacon, egg, and cheese in the afternoon. You know, maybe McDonald's has breakfast all day. Maybe you'd stop by Mickey D's or something.
McDonald's, you owe us $50 now.
Yeah, exactly. That's what we're going to do. We're just going to start billing them. It's the dead period officially, but you guys said it is far from that. So what are y'all working on? What should people expect coming down the pipe from y'all?
Well, right now they can read complete Joey Hunter commitment coverage on Gamecock Central.
If you wish.
Not now, but now when you're listening to this.
Yeah, right this second. But the thing about the dead period is that the guys can't visit schools and schools can't visit them, but they can still talk on the phone. They can still DM. They can still text. So it's really not – it's a dead period, but it's not a dead period. I think people naturally – and the people that really follow recruiting closely know this, but the people that sort of follow it from afar probably think, oh, that means nothing's happening in recruiting. But really, a lot is happening. You got a commitment today. July 8th, there's a Miles Murphy commitment where he'll be choosing, potentially South Carolina, North Carolina in there, Alabama in there. Took an official to Florida as well. So
that's Monday. So we'll at least have another emergency pod to update y'all on that result on Monday, as well as some other kind of off-season things that we'll have going. But dead period picks up again the ends at the end of the month, and then
it's like
begins
July
again at the beginning of August.
It's like July 24th. There's like a week there from July 24th to July 31st that's
So
open
weird.
again.
Does Carolina have any official visits scheduled for that window?
Not that we know of at this time, but there's I think there's a real chance that you're going to have a number of unofficials potentially there. The punter I think is already locked in for the 30th.
Yep, the 30th. Kai Kroger.
Yeah, Kai Kroger. Some other guys I think that I would expect to be on campus during that little window. And, Carolina, they're efficient when it comes to recruiting. If there's an opportunity to bring guys in, and you're really, if you look at it from a calendar standpoint, that's the week before you start preseason camp. So, once preseason camp starts, now you're always focused on recruiting, but once preseason camp starts, you got to have a lot of your energy on your current football team. So that week right there is sort of a, hey, let's get these guys in maybe one more time before the focus turns to football. And, the high school kids, after that, they're going to be focused on their own seasons as well.
Yeah, that is a curious window. You think if they wanted to have another week, they should just do the first week of July and then have it be dead period until whenever the dead period ends in August, rather than close up shop for a couple weeks sort of arbitrarily and then come back with another week and then close up shop again. So
but you got July 4th this week too. So
yeah,
I think,
true.
Holiday, give people some time off,
Yeah.
and then give them one more chance to visit or do what they need to do before the season starts.
So we got a holiday, then SEC Media Days, and then the one live week in July and August, and then guys report to camp. Football season's basically here, guys.
It is.
You all ready?
Yeah,
Got to be.
might as well.
Chris is. Wes isn't.
Got to be.
Wes is ready, though, because he's got his – what does he have on?
My
Podcasting
His
shirt.
podcasting shirt. His
I'm going to
Dunder
get a
Mifflin shirt.
podcasting shirt, too.
I
We
feel
need to
like you've
have
worn that a couple
actual
times.
podcasting.
I think
shirts.
mine's just going to say podcasting shirt.
Podcasting
That's all I was
shirt?
gonna
Yeah,
say.
whatever they are, they can't match. We can't all have the same one.
No.
You know? Is that what you were saying, Wes?
Yeah, I was going to say we could get ones that match.
I mean,
Yeah,
I
that's
think
cool. That'd be super dorky.
surely there is someone who would like to sponsor and make us a T-shirt that's listening to this. And I'll
Did
wear
you
it.
say podcasting shirt?
No, it doesn't have to say that. If they
That'd be
give us
great,
free
though.
Say
shirts
brought
to
to you
wear,
by Panera
Or whomever?
yeah, anyone.
or whomever.
Yeah, I
No.
guess I'd wear that. I
As
mean,
long as
no
it's
one
not
sees us
vulgar.
while we're doing this because we stopped simulcasting it for some reason. Which, I don't know, maybe we'll start doing that again.
Well, we
in the
couldn't
future.
simulcast this one, so
Why not? Oh, yeah, that's right. I keep forgetting that part. All right, well, that'll do it for this episode of Another Carolina Podcast. We got plenty more stuff coming for you guys in the coming weeks, and we're going to get Wes to start posting some mailbag threads to help us fill out the time and just to get your thoughts, see what's on your mind, see what we want to do more of. If you want to support the podcast, don't forget to rate, review, subscribe, and if you want a month of Gamecock Central subscriber access for free, just use the exclusive podcast code GCPOD, GCPOD, and you'll get a month of being a Gamecock Central insider for free, which is very exciting and good time to be doing that as well. That'll do it for Wes and Chris. I'm Pearson Fowler. We'll talk to you next week.